China Report.
Is out of step with the Biden administration on China. The Prime Minister is out of step with our Five Eyes allies on China. The Prime Minister is even out of step with his own caucus on China. And the experienced Liberal finance chair says that he needs to wake up and smell the roses. Will the Prime Minister wake up and remove Canada from the Asian Infrastructure Bank?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past number of years, we've always been very clear with China where we disagreed on human rights, where we have real concerns about the treatment of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, about the situation in Hong Kong. We've continued to express our concern and demonstrate our solidarity with the two Michaels and expect that they be returned home from arbitrary detention, while at the same time we continue to work with partners around the world on holding China to account and improving opportunities for our workers and businesses across the country and around the world. These are things we will continue to work on, including tomorrow in our virtual G7 meeting.
The minister told his party to get ready for a spring election. All the while, the new variants of COVID-19 are spreading like wildfire. We've seen the effect of the new variant in Newfoundland and Labrador, where people are getting sick and they're afraid to vote, and it's meant that they've had to delay the election. I have committed that I will not trigger an election while we are fighting this pandemic. Will the Prime Minister commit today in this chamber that he will not call an election while we are fighting this pandemic, yes or no?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know well that in a minority parliament, the government doesn't have the sole power to decide when we go into an election. The opposition members have a role to play, both in providing confidence for the House, but also by being able to function appropriately to deliver the help to Canadians that Canadians so seriously need. We will continue to stay focused on delivering for Canadians, delivering vaccines, over 6 million vaccines by the end of March, tens of millions of vaccines into the spring, and every Canadian vaccinated by September. That is our focus. That's what we'll stay concentrating on.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
834,100. That's the number of paychecks that are missing in Canada. It's the number of families sitting teary-eyed around the kitchen table trying to figure out how they're going to fund their future. And while the Deputy Prime Minister has congratulated Conservatives for supporting income programs for those same families, those families need jobs back in order to secure their future. With unemployment a third higher than the G7 average, when will those families have their paychecks back?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of this pandemic, we made a simple and straightforward promise to Canadians that we would have their backs, regardless of how long it took, regardless of what it took. And that's why we delivered the CERB to 8 million Canadians, even while Conservative politicians like the member from Carleton were saying we were doing too much, too fast, and, oh, you shouldn't be helping workers. You've got to help businesses faster than workers. Sorry. We were there for Canadians. We continue to be there for Canadians. And we know the best way to get the economy to come roaring back is to create opportunities for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
What the Prime Minister has just said is false. In fact, his Deputy Prime Minister thanked the Conservatives for supporting that assistance. But it just shows how out of touch he is, that he thinks that families can go on living forever off a measly $2,000 check from the government. They don't have multi-million-dollar trust funds like he does. They want jobs, like workers in other countries where unemployment is significantly lower than it is here. So why is it, Mr. Speaker, that workers abroad get paychecks while ours here at home just get credit card debts?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, among others, the IMF has recognized that Canada's approach to supporting workers, to supporting businesses, to supporting communities through this pandemic has left us better positioned to come roaring back once this pandemic is over. We had to do the things that were necessary to protect Canadians during this pandemic, and as a government, we were there to support those families. We know we are all looking forward to getting back to work right across the country, but the fact is we need to continue to be there to support them while we get through this pandemic, and this government will continue to do so regardless of what the Conservatives say.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
What the IMF actually did is cut Canada's growth projection for this year by a third, not to mention that we're falling behind the rest of the world on jobs. In fact, the G7 average is 6%, the US 6.3%, the EU 7.5%, Canada 9.4%. They all have COVID too, but they're getting their jobs back. Isn't it clear that for Canadians to regain their jobs, this Prime Minister will have to lose his?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this crisis demanded targeted, time-limited support to keep people and businesses afloat, and that's exactly what this government chose to do. The IMF report indeed found that Canada's strong and decisive actions at the onset of the pandemic, quote, provided crucial support to the economy and the functioning of financial markets and helped protect lives and livelihoods, and that Canada's strong history of prudent policy-making afforded it the policy space to respond forcefully to the crisis and avert much steeper declines in economic activity and employment. We were there for Canadians, and we will continue.
Monsieur Reyes.
Je vote pour la motion. Je vote pour la motion.
Monsieur Reyes for, Mr. Poilievre for.
Thank you.
Mr. Redikoff.
Mr. Speaker, we lost 213,000 jobs in January, most of them in Ontario and Quebec. That's 213,000 families looking for a paycheck amidst a pandemic. The Prime Minister is funding the Asian Infrastructure Bank, while his Liberal, insider-friendly Canadian Infrastructure Bank has completed 0 projects in Canada. When will the Prime Minister start prioritizing Canadian workers?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as a part of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Canada joins countries such as Australia, France, Germany, India, Italy, South Korea, and the UK in promoting growth around the world. But indeed, Mr. Speaker, when the Leader of the Opposition brings up support for workers, let me point out that the Conservative Party has consistently said we've done too much. When we gave 380,000 unique applicants for the sickness benefit the support, where we supported the wage subsidy with over 5 million jobs, over $64 billion in support for workers. We've had Canadians' backs, and we will continue to.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday experts spent hours telling committee about the conflicts of interest, the late planning, and the end run around Canadian manufacturers that defined this government's vaccine plan. By the end of last week, 2 million Americans a day were being vaccinated. We need 2 million Canadians a week to get vaccinated to meet the Prime Minister's vaunted September deadline. Why are Canadians paying the price for this Prime Minister's planning failures?
Honourable Prime Minister.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we valued the work of scientific and industry experts volunteering their time to ensure sound, evidence-based decisions during the pandemic on the vaccine task force, which has a robust conflict of interest process in place and goes above and beyond the practices of other volunteer external advisory bodies. We have moved forward on procuring vaccines for Canadians. In the coming weeks, we will be receiving millions of vaccines. We're going to hit our March deadlines, and all Canadians will be vaccinated.